Hello everyone, this is Venom Geek Media here. Now, just before I start this video, I'd like to make an announcement. I am planning on doing a Bionicle stop-motion series, which I plan on, it's based around the characters that I've created. It's an original story. I'm writing it, and I'm trying to get voice actors involved, essentially, really. So really, all I'm just asking for at the moment is voice actors, mostly female. I've got the male voice parts covered. The issue being there are quite a few female characters in here, and I haven't been able to find many female voice actors. Somehow I doubt any females watch my videos, but if you do, please, I need help with some voice acting. So if you could help me with that, and if you'd like to do some voice acting, that would be grand. Okay, thank you very much. Hello everyone, this is Venom Geek Media here, and this is going to be a bit of a different video. This is just going to be a video where I just talk, really, and talk about many and varied subjects, which I find interesting to my own self, and kind of get a perspective. So, what are we going to talk about today? Well, I thought about the true message behind Halo. Most of you probably know the story of Halo, the Halo saga and all the games. And so this video will look at the lore and actually dig deep into what the metaphors are in there. So I should just preface this by saying that this was inspired by another guy's video, which I saw. It was very interesting. I'll link it down in the description below. So basically what I'm going to look at is the true meaning behind things like the Covenant, and what they actually are and what they actually represent, because, with science fiction, this is something you can do. You can go and you can draw interpretation and comparisons with the real world. That's the point of science fiction, really, in any given form. And so, I look at the Covenant because, generally it's held that the Covenant are representative of radical Islam, this sort of dogmatic tradition and a suicidal dedication to their beliefs. Now, this contextually does have a lot of evidence to say that's probably what the creators intended, but may not actually necessarily indicate that. But actually, the more I thought about with the Covenant, in terms of what they're comparable to, yes, you can compare it to Islamic extremism, and that's a very easy interpretation to make with all their fanaticism, this, that, and the other. But actually, perhaps a bit more of a scary meaning for the Covenant, especially to us in the Western world, is in fact that perhaps the Covenant is a metaphor for the modern day world. Okay? Now, by that I mean the modern Western world, because crucially, number one, what does the Covenant do? It worships technology. I mean, yes, they'll say, well, they're worshipping human beings, but ultimately they're doing it, the objects of they'll claim that they're doing it, they're worshipping the Forerunners, but ultimately the objects of worship are elements of technology, Forerunner devices, and they worship them, and they also do it out of, we need to look into these sort of motives behind their worship. So I would say that actually they potentially do it because the Forerunners' technology is useful to them, because that then has led to their own technological development and has been sort of a key element in establishing their power. So that's kind of what why they almost worship it, because the technology has been so important. It's a very important part of their society. This is very comparable to the Western world. These days, people absolutely 100% rely on technology. We have, I know people who will say, "Oh, I've got my whole life on my smartphone," and we're devastated when we lose it, because it's things that makes our life easier. Just as for the Covenant, it's things that brings them victory and glory and strength and all this sort of national pride, wonderful thing. But you say, okay. So we both like so the Covenant like their technology, and we like our technology, but we don't worship it. Well, do we? It's gotten to the point where we seem to value technology an awful lot, and that there does seem to be a sort of a religious element around it. People like Steve Jobs and Bill Gates aren't necessarily, they've almost been elevated to the status of, if you like, these cyber prophets, put it to use religious language. They've been elevated to these sort of level of these cyber prophets. And, thing gatherings like E3 and, other sort of tech conferences, it seems to be that we are marvelling at our own ability, and actually that's kind of what the Covenant do as well. They worship the Forerunner technology because they too can use it. And so they're not actually worshipping the Forerunners, they're worshipping their own brilliance in having reversed engineered it and making it valuable to themselves and using it for their own ends. So in fact, it's a self-centered celebration, it's a self-centered worship. Humanity worships its own technological marvel in that. And this is a problem, because then essentially when you start worshipping, so that's kind of the establishment that humans, not humans, that's a generalization, that in the Western world it seems that we worship technology similarly to the Covenant. That seems to be what's coming across. And you think, okay, but what does that mean? Well, so in the Covenant's worship of technology, they are effectively manipulated, led astray, and they are set into castes, aren't they? They are split into, you have the prophets and elites at the top, then you have the grunts and all that sort of thing, going down in the echelons, and there's this caste system which is active in the Covenant. And you think, okay, so how does that relate to the modern day? We like to say we live in quite an open and tolerant society, and class is not what it was. Well, yes, there's a lot more social mobility these days, but equally, there is again with technology these sort of levels and gradients of a social pecking order, which naturally emerges in human beings, because we're social animals, so there's got to be a social pecking order, otherwise it'd be absolute anarchy. But anyway, this pecking order, as described, would look like, you have people like Steve Jobs, Steve Jobs, Bill Gates at the very, very top. These are seen as sort of the prophets, and these kind of link over to the prophets in Halo. These are the people that actually bring the machines, and they work it out. They work out how to control this technology. And then you have, there's that whole cycle. I forget what it's called, but you have, your early adopters, your mid adopters, your late adopters. And then sort of it progresses down in that order. The people who are early adopters are at the top of the social pecking order concerning technology. Certainly, they are given a lot of respect. These can be people like vloggers, YouTubers, probably somewhere around that. And then there's the rest of us. And so you think, and you say, oh, that's just normal. Then you put it in the religious context, this is part of man's self-worship. This is where it begins to get scary, because just like the covenant, we aren't perfect either. We can be led astray, especially by people at the top. We like to value a lot in the world particularly what famous people say. If an actor, an actor's endorsement can swing a vote, in some cases, so we put a lot of power and we put a lot of trust into these. And when, with technology, it becomes a self-centered worship, because, ultimately, what I'm getting at is it's almost like man moving away. Well, it's not almost like it is. It's man moving away from God. So back in whenever sort of the Renaissance, Enlightenment, and we start to move away from this Judeo-Christian tradition of worship. But then nothing steps in to replace it. And, there's a lot of evidence to say that human beings seem to have an inclination to worship of something. They have to fill that gap with something. They have to have some kind of God in their lives. Regardless of the existence of any divine being, that's a subject for another time. You do see that people feel that. Even atheists, for goodness sake, they still want a religion, though they will deny. You can some do, others are just straight up. But again, even then, anyway, I once saw this video of Richard Dawkins. I might link it, and it's part of a atheist, not baptism, but naming ceremony. It mirrors, in a lot of ways, a baptism. In a lot of ways, because it's essentially people who have chosen to reject God and all that, but they still need a form of religion, which is quite interesting. And actually, often, there are near the majority of the world is part of an organised religion, so you have that to begin with. And then secondly, those that aren't, particularly in the Western world, generally, if you ask someone, are you, do you believe in God? They'll say, oh, well, I believe in God, but I'm not religious. That's something generally you kind of encounter a lot. People will say they're spiritual. So even in the absence of an organised, of Judeo-Christianity, people still have belief. And similarly to the covenant, when they sort of abandon their own individual cultures, when all the races abandon their individual choices, their individual cultures and religions, whatever those might have been, they open themselves to manipulation, because it's a more self-centered worship, and ultimately it's a worship directed at people at the top, and it's a worship directed at flawed beings. So you say, okay, so, you kind of say, I don't know if my logic is following through. It sounds decent, this end. In conclusion, what would I say? I would say just, be careful what you worship. Be careful what you value. Be careful what you trust in life and what you see as infallible, and what you value. Technology is arguably the golden bull from Exodus. Arguably. In the absence of a divine lead, which has since gone from the Enlightenment, intellectual thought has propelled us away from that since then. Technology hasn't come into being solely to fill that void, but has found itself filling that void as a golden bull. So I would say the ultimate point and conclusion you should leave here with is, be cautious what you worship. how much you value technology over interpersonal relationships, basic things in the world, basic things in simple lives. You know, what makes a person's life better? A smartphone, or having people help, love, and care for them? That's just the question I'd leave you with. Thank you very much for watching. Please don't spam and hate and all that in the comments. If you want to debate with me, that's fine, but let's do it in a good and civilized manner. Thank you very much.